Oh, good afternoon. It's Wednesday, January 15th. House Transportation Committee back in order, I guess. I will say that. And we are welcoming. Yeah. We've got some audio again. Welcoming our new Commissioner of Department of Motor Vehicles to supply the committee with an overview of the DMV. And first, congratulations on your position and welcome to House Transportation. And we're excited to renew forever the returning members and educate new members on what it is the Department of Motor Vehicles does for Vermonters, being one of the most visible services that state government supplies to our constituents. I'm happy to hand the floor over to you. Would you like questions as you go, or would you like them at the end?
Sure, we're both as we go, and then obviously at the end too. Be happy to.
Great. I'll recognize people for their questions, and we will turn it over to you, and hopefully we'll survive the IT challenges we've had so far in the day and a half we've been headed in this direction.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate you having me here today. Members of the committee, thank you. Again, my name is Andrew Collier. I am the new commissioner. I have 4 weeks now, I believe, for the Department of Motor Vehicles. Not my first time in state government. I came over as a deputy commissioner from the Department of Liquor and Lottery, and prior to that, I was a trooper of the Vermont State Police for 12 years. So I'm joined here today with Nancy Prescott. She's our director of operations. Wade Cochran, who's our director of enforcement. The secretary here again as well, Joe Flynn. And
sorry, Mr. Secretary, I didn't even see you back there in the corner. Welcome back.
and Patrick Murphy, who's policy for the agency. So we will get started. Presentation here. I'm much like the secretary earlier today. I'm going to try not to read anything off the slides and just kind of give you that high overview. Sure.
Could you allow us to share our screen?
Yeah.
Good evidence why we only should only shake up a certain amount each year.
So you gotta figure it out.
Too many, yeah,
Beginning of May, we'll be all set.
that's
That's
right.
All right.
Yeah.
Right.
The department's comprised of 245 slotted positions. Currently, we have 9 vacancies, so it's representing 3% of the department. I think overall, we're doing quite well, considering the labor market right now. So we're always striving to do better. A big thing for me is employee morale. As the secretary mentioned earlier, retention, I think, is paramount. So I think that's where you can earn your keep and really improve employee morale. It also translates into when you have a happy workforce. I believe DMV is a retail environment. We're kind of like a lot of other parts of state government. I view it as a retail type of organization. And so when you have happy employees, you're going to get that positive customer care for the public, which Vermonters deserve. So that is my viewpoint coming to the department. So we're going to jump ahead to the DMV system modernization project. As you saw in the video earlier today, and as Secretary Flynn mentioned earlier, the legislature approved and went along with administration $50 million IT project upgrade. And that's taking a system that was developed 60 plus years ago, and getting all the information, which was held in a whole bunch of different silos into one place. It both increases the efficiency of the workforce and increases that one-stop shop for customers or for the public. That project, the first part of it rolled out last November. And as was discussed earlier, it was on time, on schedule, and costs were right on point. The last phase of the rollout, which is going to occur just prior to Veterans Day this year, is the driver services aspect of it. So that's going to be licenses, ID cards, and that's taking all the data behind the scenes and bringing it together in one place. Just some key points that occurred with this modernization project. You can manage your appointments online. The ability to go on and handle your registration, your license costs, all that kind of in a one-stop shop for the department. You're creating that frictionless user experience. And I think that's what is expected in today's marketplace, not just in government, but in private sector. And I think that's DMV's been leading the charge on that. But that's not the only activity that's happening at the department. There's the e-permitting, which kicked off in December. And that's a joint initiative with our counterparts in the agency, specifically with the engineering side of AOT. And that is to create that portal for businesses to come in with overweight permits to be able to, again, have that single place, marketplace to go in, fill out the application, follow that application through, and allows the team to be able to respond to those applications quickly and get them approved and out the door as fast as possible. It also, behind the scenes, takes into account roadway widths, bridge weights, and it helps develop a route, preset route, instead of having its manual process of you're pulling up the map on the computer and you're checking each individual bridge, road width. It's creating that route pre-planned for both the staff here at DMV and AOT, and it cuts down on that. Again, it cuts down that time to get that permit out the door and business moving on the roadways. So that is a 13-month project. Again, we started in December, and that's moving along currently along with the FAST core project that DMV has. Going to touch on finance and division with DMV, and then I'm going to hand it off here. As everybody in this room knows, the finance departments and state government are managing your invoices, your contracts. I'm not going to go too far into depth on that piece. What I really want to focus on, the area that our finance team at DMV touches, the audit unit. As some of you know, so all the gas tax, diesel tax, the international, the IFTA, which is the International Fuel Tax Agreement, and the IRP, the International Registration Plan, all those have to be audited per federal regulations. So we have an audit unit that goes out, handles the audits, and checking that everything's up to snuff and able to proceed, and that our balance sheets are matching what truck organizations have and so forth. I think it's interesting. We touch almost every piece of the transportation infrastructure. Obviously, we do under the agency, but short of aircrafts, the gas tax applies to railroads. It applies to every other type of motorized vehicle that's on the road here today. And in a incidental way, we do touch aircrafts because we do have the audit team actually works with the distribution of fuel that's going out, which would then inversely touch aircrafts. So we really have we're a lot more than just your license, your registration, your overweight permits. DMV has a massive role in this transportation conversation. Next slide. The bottom bulletin, I just want to talk on. We're still selling the Vermont Strong plates. We have sold over 2,300 plates, and that raised approximately over 82,000 in funds. I thought that's a really unique and great program here for Vermont. I think it speaks of Vermont's uniqueness and having a program like that. And happy to see that still continuing. Lastly, our special programs unit. This kind of it touches on the legislative side. A lot of the projects that occur with veteran work, veteran plates, run through. We have a special programs division at DMV. Just this week, the VA or Veteran Affairs allowed us to start making a Silver Star Flying Cross with Valor plate for veterans here in Vermont. We're working to get the approval to have each individual branch as well for veteran plates added. Another really great initiative that this team does, the Blue Envelope program, which is for people that are autistic. They're able to have a blue card if they get pulled over by law enforcement or have an interaction with law enforcement. And that blue card signifies a different approach for law enforcement to help that person have a positive interaction with law enforcement. And that's a really great program. And we're seeing that expanded across other states. And that's been a really great highlight of this team.
Commissioner, is that an enhancement to their particular license, or is that a second form of identification, or what?
No, it's
call that one. I'm sorry.
It's they call it Blue Envelope. So all your registration items, all that, you hand the blue envelope, and that signifies.
Remember, I guess I remember that one. Thank you.
No, it's been great. It probably needs to be re-amplified again out publicly, and it never hurts with the training that law enforcement does as well to re-amplify that. And with that, I'm going to pause there. I'm going to hand off to Nancy Prescott, has our operations. Then I can jump back in the end.
There.
Hello, my name is Nancy Prescott. I am Director of Operations for DMV, and I've been with DMV since 2010. I'm here to talk to you about the unit that I oversee for the team, which comprises of 4 various units, which is branch operations, which is what many of you are familiar with. That's the face-to-face contact. That is 10 locations throughout the state of Vermont. They are issuing titles over the counter. They are where the new individuals that are moving to Vermont are welcoming those individuals. Registrations, duplicate titles, regular road exams, as well as commercial vehicle exams are in our branch operations. The other unit is information processing. That is based out of Montpelier. It is backroom operations. They process everything that the counter does, but through the mail. All of the transactions of individuals that are choosing not to go online for various reasons, or that we don't have that ability, all of that work is coming through and being processed by those individuals in that unit. Commercial vehicle operations. That is a unit that is our permitting for oversize, overweight. It is where our IFTA and IRP, so our fuel tax collection, as well as our international registration plan for the commercial vehicles is also happening in those areas. We're doing the collection of gas tax and fuel for the fuel on that, as well as we are dealing with and handling the rentals. Driver improvement and information is our fourth unit. That is where reinstatement and suspensions of driver records is happening, as well as our call center from customer interactions that are wanting to schedule an appointment, or they're needing some help with a return letter that they may have received from us, or just simply how to. This photograph here is showing you what you're all probably very familiar with. This is our frontline counter staff out of various operations. Our branch operations, as I mentioned, comprises of 10 office locations throughout the state of Vermont to help serve our residents of Vermont. We have about 171. The commissioner had spoken about our DMV, permanent slots of employees. Operations has about 171 of those comprised of those 4 separate units that I spoke of. So when we speak of branch operations, we're speaking of the 10 various office locations, which does include Montpelier. We have a system that allows individuals to schedule an appointment. We do not say no to those that walk in. We accept them, we welcome them, but there is a point in the data here that I am going to show you of the various differences of one making an appointment versus a walk-in. But again, I do want to be clear that we serve all that enter in our door. So 86,000 customers scheduled an appointment. Those individuals were served with an average wait time of 10 minutes last year.
Pardon the interruption, Director. Your 10 offices, is there, could you speak to the satellite offices, or does that include that, or how does? How does like one up our way that I hear about occasionally with
Which is
St. Albans?
St.
Franklin
Albans,
County?
yes.
What, is satellites part of that, vary that, and
Absolutely.
they offer different levels of services and whatnot? Just speak to that for a little bit.
Sure can, and thank you for asking that question.
Thank you very much.
So we do have what we call satellite mobile offices. That means we are not at those locations for the 5 days, Monday through Friday. St. Albans, St. Johnsbury, White River, Dummerston are our mobile locations that we do not serve for 5 days. We offer licensing, credential issuance of any type, licensing exam for regular road. Titles are now, due to our modification, is now being issued at any office location, including our satellite offices. The only thing that is not offered at this time is our commercial vehicle exams, and those are limited to the locations due to the space and the footprint that they require. You're welcome. Thanks for the question. So we had 86,000 scheduled appointments, again, served with an average time of about 10 minutes. We had 91,000 customers that came in without an appointment. Those customers had an average wait time of 29 minutes. Our process is you are a priority when you schedule an appointment. The point of making an appointment is that you are selecting the day and time that works best for you. When an individual walks in, we're not saying we won't see you. We will absolutely see you. But if there are other appointments scheduled at that time and the customer has arrived, they will be seen first. So just to clarify on that. So here's the data point that in regards to the appointment system and the value of that is 93% of our customers with appointments, they were completed from start to finish within an hour or less. Where those individuals that had walk-ins, they actually was 74% that met that same parameter. And that's, in my opinion, a pretty significant difference. We processed 665 registration transactions. That encompasses new transactions, that encompasses renewals, that encompasses I needed a replacement, I had an address change. it encompasses all of those details regarding under a registration. Out of those, 460 of those were actually done online. That is 70% of that number. And again, that is grateful that we have been able to move forward with our modernization and continuing to move forward with the forefront thinking of modernizing. Chair, did you have a question?
I was curious, do you think there's opportunity left in that other?
Oh, absolutely.
That we'll be able to.
Yes, we are not capturing all of the opportunities at this time that can be. And part of our next phase for driver services is going to continue to evolve with that. So next year, when I'm sitting here in this position, I am very much looking forward to showing you an
That 70%
increase.
is going to be a higher number, you think?
That is what individuals want. That does not mean individuals don't want to come in and see DMV. We have that set population of individuals that want to come, and we want them to come. There is a set population of individuals that don't want to see us, don't want to talk to us, but have a need to get the business done. That is where our improvements of modernization is opening up those opportunities.
Representative Corcoran.
Can I interrupt?
Just
Yeah.
just a second, oh, sorry, we got
Oh,
Representative Corcoran was right ahead of you
oh,
already.
sorry.
That's all right. I just had a question about the wait times. It seems like 50% are there for an extended period of time. You know, so I was just wondering, what that feedback is, because there's probably more disruption, but even before, I think pre-COVID, we had wait times, and I'm pretty sure those wait times were like around 12 to 14 minutes, somewhere around a ballpark.
Uh-huh.
And it was down pat. And if you average these out, it seems like we're going in the wrong direction as far as wait time, if you balance everything
Sure.
out. So could you just speak to that?
I can. So with our modernization, one of the things that had changed, which I will speak a little bit about when I start talking about information processing, is the way we serve our customers. The way a transaction is processed. As you may recall, as a customer, you would go in with certain items. You would not necessarily leave with all of your items. Now with our modernization, the individual that is serving you, whether it be through the mail or face-to-face, it is start to finish. If you don't have a lien on that title is getting printed for you right there and you are leaving. There is more hits, if you would, from the employee individual of what they're processing at that time, which has then removed the back room as well as the opportunity of more hands in it for potential error with this new process. So as the time may have increased for certain transaction types, it's an average of all. So one of the things that I will kind of bring forth is if you come in for a license renewal because you just love coming to see our happy sunshine faces, right? And you don't want to do it online, that transaction can take as little as 10 minutes. But if you come in for a reinstatement of your license and we have to clear it and there's some missing paperwork, that can take you up to an hour, if not a little longer sometimes. So again, these were average numbers. But to answer your question, Representative, it really has a lot to do with the way we have shifted our work and what the end result is for our customer and what they are leaving with.
Sure. And then as far as the feedback, have points risen?
They have not on that.
Okay.
They have not.
Just curious.
And I am the individual office where the complaints or questions or special inquiries come to, and that is not an area. I do receive complaints, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
They're just not complaining about, well, I was here for 12 minutes in previous years and now it's taking me an hour. I'm not getting any of that.
Good, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Representative Burke.
Yeah, I had a constituent who was knocked up and Spencerville by an RV and broke his collarbone. He's a doctor, is very upset. And he, apparently this person who was driving did not have good eyesight and was an elderly person. And he wanted me presenting, when I introduced a bill to have an eye exam after age 70. And I wondered how that would, I mean, you may not be in favor of this, I don't know, we'll see, but how that would work with your, I mean, would that be, I'm not sure if maybe the people could, if they had a regular eye doctor, if they could go there, would that be something that you could set up? Or have you ever talked about that in the past, doing eye exams?
No, we have not necessarily gone down that point of saying, oh, there's an age and so forth that I'm aware of. It doesn't mean that it has, oh, did you wanna?
No,
Have
I
something?
would just say that, I don't want to cut you off, but I have had one experience where a medical doctor provided information, and I believe that's the process today. If an MD or a family member goes to an MD about a family member, and we get something from an MD, I believe we legally have the right to require that person to retest. And a test would also include the eye test. But it isn't just the eye test, it's everything else, including, I think, the road test. So there is a process today that I believe is directed toward the concern that your constituent raised. It's how is it treated? I can't envision a scenario
So
where.
he wanted everybody over a certain age, that is.
Right, I mean, that's,
I'm just saying,
Sure.
I'm acting on behalf of the constituent and just trying to get the landscape of
Sure.
how that might work or not work.
Yeah, currently the process is, as the secretary mentioned, a medical would come in from the physician or law enforcement for various reasons. And then we follow through the process. We do not have anything currently that says everybody that's on their 70th birthday would come in and we would administer.
Some people, I think it's New York State, everybody has to have an eye exam. I don't know, my constituent did a lot of research. Anyway, just checking that out, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Would this, if something like that, a requirement, additional requirements with your new system in the direction, if additional requirements were made, whatever they might be, is it in a position to be able to handle such things? In other words, is it a major change now, or is it a lift that you're?
That is a lift. Any of the ideas that would come forward would require review to depend on and to balance out what that lift would look like. How many hours to program? Does it need programming? Our modernization system is in many other states throughout. It is a DMV system. So when we're speaking of possible changes, that is one of the things that I personally believe we're very fortunate to have chosen and gone with this vendor, because DMV business is very similar in other areas.
So if I'm understanding, if I'm not advocating for any additional,
Sure.
I'm just saying that it is likely run to happen somewhere else in the other states, and this system would have been already looking to handle additional.
And they
States
would,
have more and some have less, and we can handle it.
and we,
Likely.
it would have to be a review process for sure to balance out the pros and the cons and any impacts to financial or.
How about we say compared to previous, if we rewound 5 years compared to now?
Absolutely. That is an excellent point, and that is spot on. Because we have been so put in a box due to lack of our modernization and the ability. We have not been able to consider many changes because it was such a manual lift, such a paper to how to document and how to keep file and how to retract. So I appreciate you bringing that forward, because the opportunity that we have with our current modernization is huge.
Thank you. Secretary
and
Flynn?
I apologize, I should have said Joe Flynn, I guess.
Thank you.
I might just offer this as well. If the legislature were to find this an interesting conversation and wish to do something, it might also consider, does that person of that particular age, can they just go to an eye doctor instead of coming to DMV?
Yeah.
Because I think we'd have to, the point Nancy's saying about look at it, from where I would sit, how many people do we currently have that are 70 and over who are, license holders? That would be added churn, right? Just simply because of their age, right? It takes however many minutes to do that properly. So, if that were the intent of a piece of legislation, perhaps it could also include that that citizen just wanted to go to their own eye doctor
Yeah.
and provide the proof
I think that would be.
versus
a
going
better
to
option.
GMB
Setting it up.
to wait to look at the eye chart.
Right,
Because there are many impacts to that, right?
right.
Good and bad. We just need to be able to balance and weigh in.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you. So talking about credentials, there was 213,000 credentials that were processed. Those are all types of credentials, including IDs, licenses, enhanced driver's license, commercial vehicles, permits. Out of those, 139,000 of those were renewals, and 98,000 was processed online. And let me just put out there, we have an online mechanism that we pushed out during COVID. This is driver services that's going to be going live in November of 2025. So this number, when you were asking, Chair, do we expect that this number is going to increase? Absolutely. Absolutely. The next slide is showing an individual in an information processing unit. This is, again, our back room. This is individuals processing from A to Z, the information and applications that comes in the mail. These individuals are picking up the phones when things are not complete to speak to those individuals when the ability offers up where somebody answers the phone to help facilitate. Other than that, we're doing return letters to communicate with our customers. That's where it's also coming back to our information unit saying, hey, I've received this letter. It's saying this. Could you please help guide me of what is it that I'm looking for to understand if there's a missing piece there? Information processing is supporting of all of our locations and our customers, which are our individuals as well as businesses. These individuals are responding by phone as well as, like I mentioned, by the mail component of it. Prior to our modernization, our dealers' mail that came in from the dealers as well as individuals was all lumped and processed together as one. With our modernization, we have worked to separate out the dealers as they are our partners that we are continuing to work with and trying to improve. And I believe our numbers through last year have shown the significance level of improvement. So our mail processing processed 115,000 pieces of mail. The average process time was 4 days. Just to clarify what that means is we received it in Montpelier. That starts as day one. And I was able to process that transaction fully to where it's now going out in the mail back to the customer completed. We received 70,000 pieces of dealer mail now that we're separating it out. And again, their turnaround time is about 4 days on the average right now. Previous to our modernization, from start to finish, because it was broken up into so many units, it averaged out to be as high as 35 days before you received your transaction completed. So this is very good initiatives going, and we continue to see improvements. Our driver improvement unit is, and information, our driver improvement unit is the unit that goes ahead and does the reinstatements, as well as driver suspensions of licenses, as well as to representative, if there was a medical that was received by law enforcement, a physician, they're also handled in our driver improvement area. Our information unit is our phone call center, where much of that communication does come through the phones, but it is coming through many venues now as well via email and chat. We answered approximately 180,000 calls in that unit last year. We do have a third party that is our scheduling unit, that if an individual chooses to call that 1-800 just to schedule an appointment for one of our branch locations, that is an opportunity. That 180,000 does include the third party numbers. That number is down approximately from 193 calls the previous year, as well as 10,020 emails were processed last year, and that number's down a little bit from 11,800. Our driver improvement unit issued 12,000 suspensions and processed a little over 3,000 reinstatements. This photo, I just want to bring a little attention to. Our examiners throughout the state of Vermont do come in twice a year for a training update to help make sure that we are all on the same page from a standard of testing, as well as making sure that our individuals are up to date with any new changes, and bringing from a relationship and camaraderie. And that photo here is showing our team coming together and learning a little bit more on our commercial vehicle side specifically. And the last unit is that in part of operations. Oh, excuse me.
Representative Dodd.
Yes, back to the suspensions and reinstatements.
Yes.
Is there a context of over the years that gone up or down? And the other part of it says, hey, there's 9,000 people this year that are more suspended than have been reinstated. So is that, it's usually that way, where far more lose their license than get it back? I'm just trying to put this in perspective.
I appreciate that question. That is not something at this time that I know of the data to answer the specific questions. It is something I can certainly get back to you in relative to the previous years. I know there are different reasons that the data has shifted within recently, like during COVID, there was a backlog in regards to judicial putting in some of the tickets. So when we received them, we actually received them in very large bulks, which of course impacted the suspensions as well as the reinstatements. To speak specifically of that number in reference to the year before, I would be happy to get those numbers and get back to you.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful because on the public safety side, I mean, we hear anecdotal information anyways that, half the people that get pulled over already have a suspended license, or it's, this is
Sure.
the fourth or fifth or sixth. And, are people getting reinstated back in the system, or is there something stopping that? Like fines, or
Yeah.
I don't know what else it might be. So it'd be interesting to get a little more information.
I'll be happy to get that back to you. Thank you for asking.
Really appreciate that, Representative Pouch. Public safety being one of the top issues in the building this year that seems to make, I don't know the direct connection to it and where judiciary may or may not be interested in those things, but for us, understanding what the impact of enforcement has done, we're going to be talking about it in that same public safety arena in terms of that revenue that comes off of where those tickets are and where they've been for historically down and not down, the lack of registrations that maybe or may not be people are submitting because they're not in fear of any, or may not be, what's it done? We've had DMV fee increases that have increased revenue. This is a little bit off of the subject right this second, but we've had a number of my understanding, and we may hear more about it here, a number of collections that are down from inspections not being maybe perhaps done or registrations not done through potentially a lack of enforcement or whatever it might be. But so along where Representative Pouch opened up, I went a little further down that rabbit hole than probably appropriate right this minute, but I'd kind of like to throw that out there, that the idea of what's the impact on public safety and revenues to the state when there's not a perceived enforcement action tap, perhaps some of our constituents see a lack of perceived enforcement in these areas. So if there's something we can do to help bring in a little bit of more we're going to come back to you guys later on. So this isn't easy solved today, but thank you for indulging, and I'm sorry to jump further down that rabbit hole. Please, that's where I'm supposed to be.
No worries. And our last unit is our commercial vehicle operations, our oversize permits, our registration plans for IFTA, for fuel tax collection. So last year was collected 85 million in gas tax, 17 million in diesel tax. For IFTA, it was a little over 1 million. And IRP registrations, those were a little over 12 million.
Representative Thomas.
Thank you. Could you just speak a little bit to what the International Fuel Tax Agreement and International Registration Plan are?
Yes, so the International Fuel Tax Agreement is an agreement in regards to throughout the country. And the vehicles, and same with the registration plan. One is for registration, one is for the tax of the fuel. So we have individuals that are crossing the borders throughout the country. We are getting receipts of and the agreements of who's coming through our roadways for us to be able to collect specifically the amount of miles individuals are on the Vermont roadways, as well as Vermonters crossing over into the other borders from that. It's a national plan. You're welcome.
Please, Representative Teaser.
There's been, it seemed to be, there is a change in the registration procedure. Could you explain to me, no stickers, doesn't seem to be, anyway, there's been a change. Can you explain that?
So you were speaking of personal vehicles.
Yes, ma'am.
And yes, that's little sticker in the back in my law enforcement partner may be able to speak more of that. It was agreed upon last year, to do away with that little sticker. Law enforcement was involved in that due to it. And I don't want to misspeak here on the fact that the individuals from a law enforcement, the value was very minimal versus what the actual plate and what they had on their systems to see that an individual was actually registered. From what I'm understanding is the little sticker couldn't be seen from that value. So it was from a cost basis analysis and other things. I don't know, Secretary or Commissioner?
It was multifaceted. So there was the cost of purchasing some highly specific printers that you have to print that in very high heat. It was going to cost a significant amount of money. I don't know if I remember. On top of that, just speaking from personal history of patrolling roads, you cannot see those stickers. It was, you end up, if you pull over a vehicle, you end up running that registration anyways, and it gives you that readout. It was.
Is there any increase in unregistered vehicles because of they're not designated? Do you know?
I don't know if they're.
I mean, if you don't have to have a sticker on your car unless you get stopped, nobody knows, am I
But
on
you
the
have
right track?
you have to show valid registration
Oh,
annually when you get the car inspected.
Okay,
So
so you
I
get it
think the
that way.
premise is that, I suppose if a person wants to try to thwart regulations, unless you just happen to get stopped for some other reason,
Right.
theoretically could get away with driving with an unregistered vehicle, but you can't get that vehicle inspected. And so the inspection sticker is now still visible in the lower left-hand corner of the windshield. And I think that's the idea. It really is a cost benefit.
Gotcha. Oh, yeah, that's no problem.
So,
It just seemed, okay, that's fine. Old school, right?
well,
Okay.
It's
you
a
hear
new
that.
process.
Yeah, it's a new process and people weren't expecting it. I don't know. The other thing is license plate and replacement of license plates. I find that as we go on, some of them become absolutely unlegible. And is there any accommodations? I mean, that's a wide open question.
Yes, there is, and there is a replacement form, is what it's called, a replacement plate form. And individuals, and it is part of our inspection, actually, that the individuals at the inspection stations should be encouraged and to come and reach out to DMV. If a plate is not legible where it has peeled, you can no longer read it, we will replace that for you. If you are choosing and you have a regular 7-digit plate, we will hand you another plate right then and there and swap it out. If you are married to that plate and say, it's not a vanity, right? It's just one that you have had for the last 25 years and you are dear to it. It's going to take a little longer because we have to order that special plate. But if it's no longer legible, that's our responsibility.
So the catch is the registration, or inspection, excuse me. It's the inspection that
It doesn't
catches all that.
stop you from getting your vehicle inspected. It
No.
will have the conversation to the customer to state, hey, this is not legible. You have to have a legible plate. Please reach out to your DMV. There's no follow through on that. From them.
I think added to that, as Nancy said, if you're not married to the number, we'll give you a new registration number then and there, and that's no cost. If you must have that same number, there's a charge because we literally have to, our plates are made at Department of Corrections. They literally have to stop the presses, so to speak. You have to change the templates to show the numbers you have, press the plate. We'll discuss the future of plates perhaps at another time. And that's where that cost comes in that we have to bear. So that's transmitted to the consumer. Otherwise, we'll replace you with plate free.
Thank you.
All right, with that, I'm gonna pass it over to my colleague. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Wade Cochran. I'm the Director of Enforcement and Safety. I'm also now the clicker of of the PowerPoint. So I'm going to talk to you about the Enforcement and Safety Division that I oversee at the Department of Motor Vehicles. So we're comprised of three different units. In that unit, we feature sworn and non-sworn investigators and civilian employees. The first that I'll discuss is Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Unit. Those are the trucks that you'll see out on the road that say DMV enforcement on them. Those are all sworn, uniformed officers, and their primary mission is enforce the laws and regulations pertaining to our commercial vehicles. So the big vehicles that we see out there. And I'll go into depth more on each unit. The investigative unit are our plainclothes investigators. We also, within that unit, we have sworn and non-sworn. So we have civilian investigators. And the education part of that, education and safety office. The primary mission is regulation of motor vehicle dealers, inspection stations, and investigate, which we're getting a tremendous amount of fraudulent or illegal activities that would involve our department to start an investigation to any of those dealerships or inspection stations.
Wait, what would be some examples of some of the ones you investigated in the past or in general without specific?
Sure.
What kind of these fraudulent activities are we talking about? What's the nature of these cases that you're talking about? I'm not familiar with that.
Sure. So one in particular that just came across my desk the other day, it was an inspection station that was basically trying to pass a vehicle for inspection that shouldn't have been passed. So the person was plugging in another vehicle, another one that would pass inspection because they have to be plugged into the computer system once they're plugged in. However, the VIN, I'm not sure on the exact particulars of if the VIN showed up right away, that alerted our folks that we need to look into this person. This dealership, which the investigation has now started. It's not completed. And they're going to have some answers or have to answer to why they were doing that. I'm trying to think, we get a lot of fraud cases. And some of the frauds that we see that funnel through ours is not maybe non-residents saying that they're a Vermont resident, coming into our state or saying that they have lived here and possibly using a bad post office box or using what's the word I'm thinking of? The virtual office.
It's a new term to me, virtual office spaces now, where you can rent a business address that's shared by other venues.
So they're not actually here, but they have that address that shows that looks like they're here. So those are some of our major ones right now.
And some of that is tied to criminal activity. In other words, we've had cases where criminals in New York City would fraudulently attempt to register cars in Vermont because they want the obscurity of an out-of-state license plate to play in their favor of, what they're doing. And in Wade's shop, we often deal with police departments and other parts of the country, primarily maybe New England, for that sort of activity. I mean, there's an element of criminal actors who deliberately attempt to defraud us for either credentials, licenses, and I'm not talking about immigration, I'm talking about criminals, or also just fraudulently obtained inspections.
Mr. Secretary, I just find it what must come across your desk in a day-to-day, a wide variety of just what we've heard about today. Always amazes me. Please continue.
All right, and then the next unit is our education and safety unit. Their oversight is of training the schools, motorcycle safety that you'll see in the summertime in certain areas, and school bus driver training, which is huge right now, and third-party testing, meaning the third-party testing is basically someone who teaches driver's ed is a private company and they have certain, we have to monitor their education, their hours, how many students, et cetera. And then, of course, we have an administrative unit that works with all the other three units. I know I said three, but how we've changed the makeup a little bit is our administrative unit. We have one administrative personnel assigned to the commercial unit, one to the investigative unit, and one to the education unit. So it seems to work well that way. So the next one, and I'm going to turn around, it's picture time. So this is some of what our commercial motor vehicle inspectors are seeing. So, and I'll go over some. In the top corner, you can see the brake right in the frame. So obviously that one should not be on the road. That was put out of service. This vehicle here had no lug nuts securing the tire. Obviously that one was put out of service too. And then if we come over to the container, the IBC container, that's not properly attached. So if there was ever an accident, that, could cause serious issues. The next one is it's a leaking wheel hub. I'm not a mechanic, but I was informed that basically that doesn't allow the brake to perform the function it was designed to do, making the brakes faulty and not working. Down in this corner, we've got that's a brake out of adjustment. You can see how technical the guys have to get, guys in the other inspectors, by getting down there and measuring. The next picture over, you can see a good set of winter tires for and this is actually a very recent picture, so it's kind of scary. And then the next with the red strap around it. So that's an air tank for the brakes on a tractor trailer unit. And it should actually have two straps holding that to the vehicle. But they improvised and they used the red strap here.
And by straps, metal strapping, not.
Sorry, yes. And then if we come over here, and hopefully everybody can see it, this picture is of a vehicle that's made to look like it's properly attached, but certainly isn't. The chains are loose. At least on this side, the other side looks like it's tight. And then the last picture here, we have a broken leaf spring on a tractor trailer. Several, yeah. It's a costly fix there. So a lot of those vehicles were put out of service. And they're put out of service for a period of time that they're basically, the manuals will tell them that they have to be out. FMCSA manual, sorry. So the commercial motor vehicle unit, they're comprised of full-time law enforcement officers. And like I mentioned, they're responsible for the enforcement of federal statutes governing commercial motor vehicles, which is commercial, you'll hear me say CMVs. We have 23 inspectors, and that ranges of, we have a captain, lieutenants for each corner, basically each corner of the state. And then what the officers do is they inspect commercial motor vehicles and the drivers for their safety. They audit the carriers. They protect state and federal infrastructure through size and weight enforcement. And then some of the highlights of 2024, DMV CVE inspectors conducted over 8,700 inspections, and they placed about 20% of those out of service, which is kind of scary. And I think the pictures show you why.
1 in 5. Please go ahead.
Yeah.
That's a
1
big
in 5
number.
just seems like a lot. So they're placed out of service. Is there a fine? I mean, or is because it's federal, how does that? how are they reported? You know, what happens if I'm driving down the road? Have just by bad luck, I get pulled over that particular day.
Right.
And it's by random chance, and you know, my leaf springs are found to be broken. What happens at that point?
Sure. So certain federal motor carrier dictates what the fines will be in the out of service term. What puts you out of service? For example, if you have any alcohol on board, you're out of service for 24 hours. And if you, and just I'll try to think of some examples, the bald tires obviously will put you out of service until they're repaired. If you have a minor infraction, say you're over your drive time by a half an hour, you basically have to stay off for, I think it's 8.5 hours till you can recoup that time, and then you can drive again. Fines go with every out of service. And those are also dictated by the federal motor carriers.
Does Vermont collect those fines, or does a portion, you know, where are they allocated?
I don't know if a portion comes back to Vermont.
Yeah, we can follow up with you, but I believe it does get captured at the US DOT level and manifest itself back for that federal funding I talked about today.
Okay,
If I may, though, just also offer that that's not all they do out there. They enforce Title 23, which is Vermont motor vehicle law. They act like a trooper or a sheriff on the interstate or any secondary road. They have vehicles pass them. They have vehicles approach them. They will stop vehicles for speeding, whether they're commercial motor vehicles or whether they're passenger cars. So the work that the director's talking about is additional work. It's the primary focus, but it's additional work to traditional policing work that they are lawfully allowed to do as well. And it's not a week goes by because the director's department furnishes, obviously through the commissioner, everything I see weekly. And it's astounding the number of speeding violations in commercial motor vehicles as well as pleasure vehicles. And it's just unbelievable the people who will actually pass a marked police cruiser at enormous speeds. And I guess they just don't think of, you know, the black truck that says police on it. You know? But anyway, I just wanted to emphasize it's more than just the technical part of regulatory action. They have full police powers. They're fully equipped. They're very well equipped. They train with federal agencies as well. So, because at the end of the day, they could be called to anything as a certified Vermont law enforcement officer, and they have them.
With trucking being such a critical part to Vermont, since everything practically a huge percentage is trucked in here to keep this place going, and it is already a regulated industry. It has a pretty significant amount of regulation on it. 1 in 5 out of the inspections, which I have no idea what that means to the amount of uninspected. Is there a bigger safety concern there than what I'm understanding, or whatnot? That if 1 in 5 is inspected, if it were extrapolated out of the obviously hundreds of thousands of more than that vehicles that are out there, should I have a safety concern in this arena?
Well, I think it shows, if anything, it shows the importance of what our guys do, and you know,
You have more resources than you do.
I always want more resources.
Well, I guess that's a question for another presentation, but that's certainly that particular bullet. Certainly, I would imagine by the nods around the table,
Right.
we're obviously just seeing it, and so I'm sure there's way more to it. But it certainly does ask a question saying, you know, do we need more resources in some areas than what we have?
We're also using new technology. There's some new technology out there. We just installed smart roadsides. I don't have a lot on a presentation for that, other than I was just shown smart roadsides the other day by one of my captains, and was so impressed by what the smart roadside picked up. and I may have to call on you, Commissioner, a little bit, but the tractor trailer went over this area in the highway and it detected that it had a flat tire on the inside of the truck. So when we get to, or when we're using tools like that, that's just going to make the job even safer make it easier for our people as well as, or more efficient, I should say, as well as safer for Vermont and other states because these trucks are going through.
Just curious if there's any correlation with these failed inspections. When they fail, do they usually coincide with higher weight limits that, is there any, they towing way too much?
We see that a lot. And a lot of times our folks will report back to me that on the weekends, that's when they see some of the overweight. And I think it's because it's assumed we're not out there maybe on the weekends, but a lot of our folks will flex and do different time and they'll be out there different times when we're not expected. I don't know if that helps answer.
No, I'm just curious when weight limits does come up in our committee from, time to time, but
Sure.
sort of a scary statistic that are failing out there, and the ones that are failing seem to doing, wild west,
Understood.
what they, want. And is there a higher fine or stricter, not outside of the field safety is like, they get penalized more?
So they would, and I would have to look at, I think it's 47 CFR. But what I was told by my captain and have been educated on is a lot of times it's the same companies that we see time and time again that will try to push the limits, which I can't understand because the fines are usually quite heavy. And they'll fix it, get it back on the road, and then something else. Same company. So not always.
We changed, I could be wrong, but doesn't it go towards the driver and the company?
It depends on.
I'm confused on that. I thought we did something else.
Smugglers not. You might be thinking-
Maybe it's smugglers not, that's what we're talking about. Oh, it goes back to smugglers. Yeah.
There was only one, right?
Well, we did hear clearly earlier in the secretary's testimony, I recall him saying something about that heavy weight is a major, what is it that you said about heavy weights are a major issue with the condition of the road or something? You said something specifically to the heavyweight vehicles on the roads this morning. So
Yeah.
it seems that, it makes some sense to ask a few more questions just for us to understand what you're showing us.
Absolutely. And so just a little bit on, the secretary spoke about this, but a few more. Our people, our inspectors have to be trained on hazmat. They have to be trained on size and weight, which we've just discussed. Passenger buses have certain restrictions. They have to, and so those are each additional classes on top of what they already go through at the Vermont Police Academy to obtain what I did as a municipal police officer prior, what the state police, some of their officers do, et cetera. And that rolls me right into our inspectors also assisted with the governor's 10-point plan by securing crime scenes, conducting early morning snow patrol during snowy inclement weather. I had a captain that was volunteered to sit on a homicide scene to assist last year, which is definitely not his main focus, but we're making sure that we're available to help. The snow patrol, the inspectors are getting out there at 4 a.m, checking the highways, the roads for anyone off, someone that might need assistance. At least they're out there because those are the times that are pretty much uncovered. So, and also this last year, the CVE created a HEAT team, which is a high enforcement activity team. And that traffic team focuses on commercial motor vehicle moving violations. And they also focus on high crash areas. So we have data, we pull the data and find out where possibly there's high crash areas. That team will focus there. And that's where that team will also focus more on regular motor vehicle stuff, but with a focus also on commercial motor vehicle.
I could just. A good example of that, Route 22A, several, in the news quite a bit, several years ago. A lot of crashes, both more, just more vehicles and heavy trucks or track trailers. I believe, if I remember correctly, the statistic, I think we went 15 months without a commercial motor vehicle fatal. And the team, that's an area that the team focused on was that Route 22A corridor. And seen some great success in lowering motor vehicle crashes, speed infractions, or poor driving.
Yes, Representative White.
Yeah, Candace White, just to follow up on that. How are you, how are you seeing that success? Was that because you had more staff on 22A regulating, watching the trucks, pulling them, like, inspecting them, or what actions did you take that caused, this better situation?
Yeah, I would say it's a deployment of the resources, using the data to target those areas, and that was a high area, so the team focused on it. I know Route 4 corridor is another area that the team focuses on. Again, it's using the data and it's putting the resources, and it's this team is strictly that. They're, everyone's mobile and moves around the state and makes commercial motor vehicle stops or inspections. This team is really, they focus on those areas that we're seeing the data trends and putting that resources in for extended time there to really change driving behavior.
But just so that I'm clear, making sure that trucks are maintaining weight standards on those roads, like that's one of the things you're looking for?
Yeah.
Speeding, I mean.
Yeah.
Much of what occurs on 22A are the result of speed stops. So you get stopped for speeding, and oh, by the way, you're going to get an inspection, but you're still going to get the speeding ticket. I mean, depending on.
Right.
Right.
And could it be that they're taking a different route? Like I'm thinking about that road that goes along Lake Bomazine, which is a bit like, when you see a big commercial truck,
Right.
it's like an elephant on a tightrope.
Right.
And there are a number of, I've seen a lot of increase. I'm just curious, like, are trucks allowed on a smaller road like that? Is that a loophole or?
In the case of Route 30, which would be a parallel option, yes, they are. Our teams are pretty astute. If we set up, for example, at Colchester northbound at the way station, Colchester, we generally have a unit on Route 7. And if you're on Route 7, you're going to get stopped because the probable cause for a commercial motor vehicle is simply your presence. Unlike any other motor vehicle stop, you need a probable cause. But the fact that you're a motor vehicle, the fact that I should say you're a commercial motor vehicle because they operate under federal rules, you are there, that's PC. So, we might not get everybody because you might stop one and 3 more might go by you. But the word gets out pretty quick and we monitor the CB radio channels. And I mean, these people put it out on the air.
Right.
So
Thank you.
if I may just couple on one thing too that the director said, there's a long list of cooperative involvement, but one of the most recent, the event of the shooting of the St. Johnsbury police officer, like other police departments, DMV backfilled St. J for a few days doing traditional local policing. And we had a captain with the family at Dartmouth that night because they happened to be friends and colleagues from the academy. But I continue to want to reinforce the fact, as we all do, that it is more than just a regulatory body that looks for flat tires and broken springs. These are police officers who are able to handle whatever comes their way. Their primary duty is around the type of discussions that you're hearing the director bring up. But there are numerous times they get requested by federal government agencies, certain federal government agencies, to do certain things. Another strange one is there's scheduled radioactive material that crosses the borders into Vermont. I say scheduled because none of us know about illicit materials, but the scheduled materials are met by DMV at the port of entry and the Vermont Health Department. And the health department tends to be, if you will, the security of the vessel, whatever that is that's being transported. DMV looks at the trucks. Those packages often have a security element with them, but that all stops at the border until it's cleared by the health department and DMV. Just very unique, nuanced things that they do that is not high profile. It's clearly public now, we're on public record. And that's fine. I mean, it's not an unknown thing, but it's not known by a lot of folks, but clearly like to talk about it.
It's I guess, what do they call the rabbit holes that we all enjoy? And I don't remember a lot of this conversation from previous pieces. And I'm not sure where we're at with time, how we're doing on time for.
We're almost done too.
In terms of the rest you had, because I would certainly toss you another question in that whole area of commercial enforcement. The issues do you happen to know at all? If you, independent contractors versus our scheduled, in effect, our common carriers, New England Motor Freight or what, you know, the Carpenters Transports of the world, and then you got your courier package. That's a significant portion of what comes through, but there's a huge amount of independent contractors. Then you have the Canadian traffic. So out of that 20% failure, do you have any idea if there's a particular segments that are, say, perhaps more injurious to Vermont roads than some of these others?
I would have to get that data.
No, I don't need that.
Certainly don't have it, but
I'm just more interested in after what your people think or whatnot. And then if you do have data, that's great, but I'm kind of curious because it's a pretty segmented industry.
yeah,
And I'm curious if you must know kind of where your troubles are coming from in that area, but I'll certainly want to make sure we have time to keep moving on presentation wise. So the number might not be as bad as it, depending on what it is and where it's coming from.
I will definitely research that with them and ask, because I don't have that answer. Any other? Okay. So one of the other units is the investigations unit. So these are the plainclothes detectives. And that unit's comprised also of sworn and civilian officers who investigate different various complaints. It could be a complaint that comes from Nancy's group that comes to us that we need to further look into. It could be one of you folks calling me and saying that you have a constituent that has some concerns. So, and they all look into those. They also administer the vehicle inspection. They look over that program. They also do, work with the total abstinence programs, and then they regulate all the state motor vehicle dealers. So, and I'll go into depth a little bit more on that. So the Enforcement and Safety Division provided approximately 700 requests in 2024 to investigate state, local, or to assist, state, local, and county agencies. And that's some of the cases that I was talking about, as well as some of what we discussed earlier, assisting other agencies, and maybe they have a wanted person running down the road and we're there at the right time or in the area. Inspectors from the investigations unit continue to support the Chittenden County Gun Violent Task Force. We currently have 2 members on that task force, along with their regular duties. And with that, they also execute warrants. We have one officer right now, or one investigator that works with one of our federal partners he's on their task force. And that's generally can be violent crimes he was actually last year, I'm not sure if the past commissioner spoke of it, he was the only Vermont officer to go to Maine for the mass shooting and help them out over there. And then So we monitor approximately 1,000, monitor and investigate 1,000 total abstinence participants each year. Not each year, I'm sorry, as total. As well as screening new participants or new applicants that want to come into the program. Those investigations are quite lengthy. We obviously want to do our due diligence to make sure that these people are okay to get their driver's license back. They regulate 1,051 license inspection stations and 561 dealerships. The unit also investigates, which we've touched on already, but fraudulent activity from DMV transactions. That could be someone coming in to, Nancy's folks downstairs and having a fraudulent piece of mail that shows they live here or et cetera. And one case that I'll touch upon that they did work, the investigators, the unit basically obtained a federal indictment for the offense of wire fraud, mail fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity. That was all one case. So it took a considerable amount of time for these investigators, and it was a group of them that worked together on this and ended up with a conviction. And some of our investigators have also, they've either come from another agency where they retired, where they've worked with the federal government or state government. And then, so it kind of gives us the resources to work together. And then lastly, if there's any questions on that. And then lastly, we have our education unit. And as you can see in the picture, the motorcycle safety and the school bus. And the one that's on your left is one of our inspectors. She actually threw out the first pitch at one of the lake monsters. So
Wow, from the speed of that.
So the education unit, state drivers, they administer the motorcycle program. And I think I touched upon this, but they also do school bus training and some of the CDL. So they supported 63 standard and 7 commercial driver training schools with a total of 7,261 students trained. DMV license programs had about a 90% passing rate, which is pretty good. Agency of Education programs had a 70% passing rate. So before I get to the question, I'll address this because I had that question. Why is the Agency of Education less than ours? Why is their passing rate less? And what I found is that in some situations over the past year, they had several students that never finished the program. So that would lower the passing rate. Considerable number actually that didn't finish. We administered 57 school bus driver clinics, 559 drivers were trained, 269 new drivers, and 290 renewing their certifications. We've also expanded that a little bit to Burlington. I think it's Burlington School District. We've reached out to them because they had a shortage of school bus drivers. So we were trying to help with getting training within their facility to help them out. So, and we had 34 motorcycle safety instructors trained, 1,080 students across 8 sites with a passing rate of 90%. With the motorcycle safety, this summer with the floods, we ran into a little bit of problem. It was the St. Johnsbury site that part of it got washed out. That is now rebuilt. So, because that was one of our main areas and ready for the summer. And then child safety seats is another thing that our education unit will contribute to. We conducted 15 child seat inspections this year, 5 at the South Burlington branch, 10 at the Montpelier branch, and provided and installed 4 passenger seats to the low income family. Now, this number is down from last year, and part of the reason that I found is that we lost some of our car seats also in the flood, so we had less car seats, as well as we'll install them if people call, but we need maybe do some more outreach and let people know that we do that. We have done more outreach on one of our commercial vehicle inspectors. She's a safety seat technician. So I think she installed, and that's not in these stats, about 54 car seats. So that's, I mean, it's great. She's out there working with them. She's worked at the Essex County Fair and let them know as well that she is a car safety seat tech. So, but, oh, sorry.
On the child safety seat inspection, and the necessity of doing more outreach to increase that number, have you thought about, working directly with all the daycare centers we have, in the state to just go on site to do inspections when parents are dropping off their kids or picking them up?
Sure. We haven't given that thought. That's a good idea. One of the main reasons is I only have one technician within the office that could do it. So it's easier if they come to us and then he can install those there. Rena has a little bit more flexibility where she could go out and install the safety seats if needed. And that's what she's done. And she's also she has worked with some daycares down, I believe, in Chittenden County area. So that's a great idea.
Great. Thank you very much. Commissioner, are you coming back up, or are we nearing the end, or how are we tying it up?
That's all we had, Mr. Chair. If any other questions?
I have a question for you. You've been here, you said 4 weeks?
4 weeks.
What was the big draw? How did you decide to come to DMV? Was this part of what we saw from the recruiting effort earlier?
No, this opportunity came about. It's an area that touches back to my previous experience in state police with motor vehicle law. And I was fortunate to have my years at the Department of Liquor and Lottery. I think it has a lot of the same similarities with, if you take that retail focus and able to kind of mesh those together here at DMV. And certainly under Secretary Flynn, I'm very biased on this, but this has been one of the best departments stepping into. And I've had a tremendous amount of fun getting spun up in the last 4 weeks. And I look forward to kind of what the future holds here for DMV, for the agency, and honestly the state as well. So
For members of the committee, we will see the commissioner and his team much more in the second half after the crossover, of course, and whatnot. We certainly look forward to that. Representative Keiser, you have a question?
Well, more a question and a statement, and maybe a place to go. So I operated both trucking in-state and out-of-state. We did all sorts of, IRPs and things like that. So I'm very familiar with what you do. Commercial driver's license came into effect in the 90s. And so there was it's a relatively new to the industry type of thing. And getting specific about the repairs that you saw. Now, our shop, you've got to understand that the driver is responsible for seeing all those things before he does a pre-trip inspection and a post-trip inspection. And if that person doesn't have, if something's wrong, he can't go out on the road. So there's a real economic driver to get that truck out. Okay. Now, my shop aside, but what you'll find, and I think what you said, Commissioner, was that you see the same similar events happening within the companies. Same companies get the same thing over and over and over again. Okay, the reason for it, if you have one truck that gets a $5,000 fine, but you've got 15 trucks that are doing $100,000 worth of business, what difference does it make? And you can't find a mechanic to fix it. Okay, so the thought might be that in that environment, like a retail theft thing, if you have a company that has multiple infractions because of safety, which is what you really need to tackle, maybe that's a time to step it up and not just be one-off and one-off, but have a consortium, or not consortium, the wrong word, but have an aggregate where you would, and if the federal government does this, they shut down carriers. But as an interim, and not interim, but as a sort of a mid-course, instead of shutting them down, there may be space in there where you find your frequent offenders and some law that says, or some regulation that says that they have to go through whatever. I'm just offering. But there's an economic incentive not to repair your vehicle to the poor operators. It drove us crazy.
And I think there's opportunity for, and we're happy to go out and assist companies. I can think of, just because I worked there when I was my very first job in fourth grade, was cleaning buses for Premier Bus for Shaw Boys, 4 hours a week, and very first job. But that's when I at first saw DMV would come in and inspect the whole fleet for them and kind of give the blessing, if you will. And I think there's opportunity in just in my short time. I'm a big proponent of education first and compliance. And maybe there's a path there for us to look at increasing that education ability to get out to these companies and be on site and try to solve the problem ahead of time. But again, I mean, just like anything, you're always going to have people that are going to cheat the system or bricks.
And I would just caveat to that, we invited the department in every year in this fall to talk to our drivers and to get an idea of, and actually inspect the truck. And you can't imagine the angst that it caused within the company, because there's a lot to cover in that, and you just can't tell you. Anyway, let's keep it there.
Anybody?
Just one last comment on the new computer system and the whole process, and I think I told Wanda last year, the process, this continuous improvement process, and when you describe, yeah, sometimes a transaction might take a little more time, but it's start to finish, no handoffs and opportunity for errors and all that. That real continuous improvement model, I think, was just great to hear, and I'm sure it pays off dividends in the long run. So hats off to that.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all very much for your